afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm very pleased that FinTech LIVE London has asked me to be here to speak about my favorite topic, women in FinTech. Before we start, however, I want to say thank you to the entire team at FinTech LIVE London for all the colleagues that have worked tirelessly over the past days, weeks, and months to put on such a conference, to give us the opportunity to come together to learn, to professionally grow, and to have the opportunity to network. So if you don't mind to join me in a short round of applause to recognize all these colleagues from FinTech LIVE London here today. Thank you. I see very strong participation in the room here today for this topic, and I'm also going to ask to understand here today, who is a woman in FinTech? May I ask you to stand up for a moment? Any other women in FinTech? Okay. How about someone that knows a colleague or a woman in FinTech? Are you here today? May I ask you to stand up for a moment? Okay. I want to thank each one of you, first of all, for your leadership, for your interest and support to be here today, and ask that you also give a round of applause to honor everyone here who is a woman in FinTech, please. As I said, I'm very honored to be here to speak about this topic. It's not an isolated topic, however. It's a global topic. It's a topic that touches all of us because women in FinTech have a significant impact on organizations and society. And today is the opportunity to talk about this. Today is the opportunity to speak, to be heard, and to come together to make an impact together and understand how we can make that impact together moving forward. You see, for women in FinTech, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And we all have a collective responsibility here as women in FinTech. We know that women in tech roles bring relevant impact to organizations. And how do we know this? We know it from several credible resources, fact-based evidence and research that shows companies with a higher gender diversity blend, when you compare to their peers, outpace, they deliver better returns, and they outperform, on average, consistently, less diverse companies. Fortune 500 looked at companies with ratios of women in tech positions, and they realize a 66% increase in ROI. And that purchasing power of women in tech is estimated at $5 trillion. Female representation in tech roles catalyzes economic growth and prosperity. To not take advantage of women in tech in the workplace seems like a gamble most businesses shouldn't think to take. When we look at revenue generation, we think about product innovation. And here again, companies with higher gender diversity have 34% of their revenues deriving from innovative products and services. Why is this? Women often possess an intimate understanding of the customer needs. They drive a unique, innovative solution to create products that are tailored to customer needs. And women are leading innovation across industries spanning healthcare to banking. There are well-recognized names, some which you know, like Ann Bowden, founder and CEO of Starling Bank. She's disrupting the conventional banking sector, and she's focusing on her vision based on her experiences of being a tech-driven, customer-focused bank because conventional banks are lacking innovation from her point of view. She has an intimate understanding of customer needs, and she feels the conventional banks are not connecting with their customer needs in a practical way. So women in product innovation contributing to this area are really more important than ever before, as we become much more aware of biases in product development, and biases even creeping into emerging tech sectors like AI. But the competitive advantage of women in tech goes beyond innovation. They also are well-positioned to identify new solutions. Women in tech offer different methods, new strategies for how to think about solving problems. Teams reflecting gender diversity are much more likely to understand the pain points of different demographics and to develop unique solutions. A gender-diverse organization inherently leads to an inclusive culture. And this circular economy is then enabled for inclusion to facilitate and promote and introduce innovation into the organization. An inclusive work environment and work culture brings greater collaboration and an openness to creativity. And it accelerates productivity. And in the end, it benefits customers, organizations, society, globally. The impact of women in tech are abundantly obvious. Gender-diverse companies are more profitable, more innovative, more inclusive. So I've shared some fact-based research here, which is one side of the story. Seems like we're gaining ground, this topic of women in tech, women in FinTech. But if we're honest with ourselves, we're still facing headwinds. I say, Houston, we have a problem. Let's take a look at some simple numbers which tell us an interesting story. Here we see between the US and Europe, the US having more or less an equal balance between the number of female graduates in tech studies and the pipeline, then converting to 24% of the same females taking a role in tech studies. In Europe, the picture is a little bit different. 34% females graduate in tech studies, but then 16% carry on to take a role in tech. Some of you sitting here today, listening, may look at these numbers and say, 25%, 34%, doesn't seem so bad. Maybe that thought is going through some of your minds. But if I tell you the percentage of males graduating in tech studies is 3 times the percentage of female graduates in the US, and roughly, again, 3 times the percentage of female graduates in Europe, for me, it's a clear sign. A change is needed, and we need to continue to empower women in tech. The supply can be so much stronger. We don't have enough females entering tech studies. And then to make the problem exacerbated, the transition of females who go on to take a role in tech is simply not there. We need together to create the bridges between female talents in tech, and female talents tech in the workplace. And then we need to connect each of these bridges. But it's not as simple as it sounds. It's simple for me to say up here, but it's not simple as it sounds. But for women in FinTech, it is our collective responsibility. Some of you may know the globally recognized Pakistani education activist, Malayu Yousafzai. She encountered very strong opposition when she took a stance opposing restrictions on female education in her home country. Very famous quote from her. There's a moment when you have to choose whether to be silent or to stand up. The reason this is relevant for me and resonates is because there were 2 female mentors in my life who chose not to be silent and to chose to stand up. You see, I grew up in a very, very modest, traditional Greek household with immigrant parents, where my role in life, my role in Greek society, and my role in the Greek family structure was predetermined. That role had no roadmap for higher education or a professional career by any means. I vividly remember asking my parents when I was 10 years old if I would be able to attend college. My parents said it wasn't necessary. Maybe a trade school, Maybe I could work part-time. Maybe I could help my husband earn a little money and pay for the groceries for the family. Maybe. So enter a high school teacher and the first female mentor experience I had. And she chose not to be silent. She chose to take a stand on something she believed in. She personally invested time to learn about me, hear my dreams, which at the time seemingly were unreachable given the cultural obstacles. She then developed a trusting relationship with my family and gave me advice and direction so I could stand up and not be silent myself. I earned a full university scholarship as a result, and this then led me to the second female mentor, who was the department head of the computer engineering department at university. Out of sheer intellectual curiosity, having no interest in computer science, I opted to take a course, learning very quickly that I was the only female in the course and the only female in the program, although I was not registered for the program at the time. Here again, the presence of a female role model, a mentor took a stand for me as the only female in a class and a program full of men, believing in my abilities, despite the obstacles that affected my own beliefs and affected my own confidences. However, this was a turning point for me. I ended up declaring my major in computer engineering, and I worked during my university years for the computer engineering department as an informal yet visible role model on campus, recruiting others, raising awareness and interest, and even informally mentoring the new incoming graduates into the study. For women in FinTech, this is our collective responsibility. We need to take care. There's a moment when you choose whether to be silent or to stand up. Think about that question for a moment. For me, the cost of inaction is significant. We recognize and we understand the obstacles women in tech are facing. We feel it every day ourselves. We are empowered, however, to identify the opportunities to foster more participation from women in tech. Here again, we need to create those bridges between the pipeline of female talent to the female talent studying tech, and then converting and connecting those bridges to the female talent in the workplace. There are ways to approach bridging this gap. I share with you one. We take incremental steps. These steps have to be accountable. They have to be visible. They have to be actionable. Driving institutional change. We all know that there is a global war on talent. We all encountered, I'm sure, on many days. Being honest, tapping into women and women in FinTech is a way to address this. We are not competitive today in technology on the war on talent. Each of us can take steps to drive institutional change for building the pipeline of females in tech, whether it be at the government level, industry level, for the industry you work in and represent, or corporations and schools. Develop a personal agenda, whether it's mentoring on an informal or formal level, positioning female leaders. All of you have a sphere of influence, however small or large that is, within your work or your personal life. Work towards positioning females, female talents, females in techs, to become leaders and to encourage them to enter tech. Create your own network, both internally and externally, and do community outreach. Last, be a communicator of change. Someone that's visible, someone that's taking actionable steps, whether it's unconscious bias, openly discussing gender gap, and leading by example. I'm sure some of you are sitting here looking at this, listening to me saying, okay, I mean, this is not a problem that is going to have overnight a big bang solution. We need to take small steps along the way, many small steps. We have many bridges to build and to connect. Think back to the number of females in tech studies. Think back to the number of females working in tech. Small steps, many small steps we have to take along the way. because for each of the gaps and the bridges we need to build, that gap in between does not have a single solution. Institutional, organizational, and personal change requires each and every one of our involvement. It takes more than this to create opportunities and to make an impact together. Again, because the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Working in tech, I consider myself extremely fortunate to be part of the UniCredit organization, where how we approach diversity, equity, and inclusion as a strategic asset to our business is embedded in what we do and how we do it. At UniCredit, part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion framework encourages a broad range of employee networks. These are based on promoting accessibility around common experiences or shared identity, and it comes organically from voluntary groups of employees with a conviction. The employee networks you can see here are formed around various challenges, be it ethnicity, disability, or caregivers, to name a few. As a strategic asset for our business at UniCredit, while we do many things across our D, E, and I framework, as it's embedded into how we do and what we do, I want to especially highlight we have employee networks connected to supporting women. Women's Network, ensuring gender equality and mutual support, where we learn and take inspiration from shared experiences through women-to-women learning sessions. STEM at UniCredit is about empowering STEM profiles. It is a small group of colleagues that had a belief in STEM that started in a very organic way and has made such a relevant impact at the bank at the group-wide level, having the attention of the highest levels of senior management at UniCredit. They truly embrace fostering an open culture for STEM disciplines. They support a network as being a belonging and inclusive space, both internally and externally. They encourage women in a STEM career, and they have community outreach to extend that to women outside of UniCredit. Pink is the latest and the newest employee network at UniCredit. It's a dynamic network within UniCredit with a very simple mission: to build bonds and foster women's success. I'm very proud to be the co-founder of the Pink Employee Network with a colleague of mine at UniCredit. We have a mission to empower and champion women in tech across geographies. UniCredit is present in 13 countries as the largest pan-European bank. We share knowledge, we share ambitions, we share experiences. And I can tell you the demand for this network has far outstripped our imagination and expectations. There is a real need, a real desire for women in tech. Reflecting a bit on the status of women in FinTech, and also discussing with my colleagues at UniCredit before I arrived here today, how to develop a framework. If there's only one item that you leave here today from this session, is to start today and pay it forward. For women in FinTech, it's our collective responsibility. And we know that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Think about how to drive institutional change yourself. Could it be through lobbying at the domestic or international bodies? Initiate your own agenda to bridge the gap. Mentor a female talent, informally, formally, doesn't matter. Ensure that high-performing women within your sphere of influence reach leadership positions, reach their ambitions in tech. Seize the moment to stand up instead of being silent, just as Malay Yousafzai did. And leverage your strengths. Be an authentic role model, advocating for solutions. Reflect your values in the daily activities, looking out for unconscious bias. Act, speak up, lead by example. This is our collective responsibility as women in tech. We need to do this together, however. So now I'm inviting you all together, personally invited, to the live poll, to the question that I want to ask each and every one of you here. What is the one action you're going to take today to bridge the gap for women in tech? Let's hear your ideas.
Mine's less of a start doing and more of a continue to do. I mean, as a white male, and not just to talk about the gender comparisons, it's difficult to work out if you have been discriminated against and there are certain privileges that you naturally fall into. So sometimes I feel a bit of an imposter trying to support women and others. But actually I think what I've started to learn is being an ally is so important, and being a visible ally. So yeah, my action is to continue to be an ally.
Thank you for being an ally and being a visible ally. Sounds like the awareness in your journey on this has evolved, and that's great to hear. Thank you for sharing. I see another colleague.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation as well. I think the action that I'm also going to continue to do is to share from personal experience or from what I'm hearing as well at this type of events, of actions that we can take, or just encourage young generations to just be brave enough, because there's nothing that would stop anyone as a woman to be successful either in tech or any other industry. So I think just sharing and encourage young generation, this generation and future generation is just something that I think is valuable.
Thank you for speaking up, and thank you for taking the bold, brave steps that you've shared with others and around you. Thank you. Yes, I think we have someone from the front here, please.
Just make this the last one.
Absolutely, thank you.
Joanna, it's maybe more a question back to you, is do you think, when I was looking at your stats around studying tech and then going into FinTech, do you think there is an assumption that you have to study tech to actually enter into FinTech roles or big tech? And there's something we could broaden awareness, in the generations. Actually, you can have a number of skills, a number of education paths.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point in the sense that when you look at the world of tech, there are roles that are not requiring necessarily pure engineering, pure math, pure science, let's say. So I think this is definitely a perception or a bias or a misunderstanding. I think it's a relevant point because the roles extend beyond that. There's roles that require functional knowledge about the business. There's roles that require expertise as a professional around testing. Roles that require expertise around user interface, user experience, customer design. So it's a really fair point. So I take your question as also an action that you'll potentially convert to try to raise awareness around this. Okay. So just to conclude, I want to thank everyone for their active listening and participation that you've shown here today. Every girl deserves to take part in creating the technology that's going to change our world, that is changing our world now, and then to change who's actually running it. I'm confident we will solve this. It will take time, and it is something we will all do together. Thank you again.